Okay, we're here in Fort Walton Beach to interview Ernest Hebson, a longtime band director at Fort Walton Beach High School. And we're just going to have a conversation. So Ernest, tell me first how you first became involved in music.
Well, that goes way back. When I was 5, 6 years old, my grandfather had a big farm. He was a circuit riding minister, and I spent a lot of time with him. And he taught me to play the harmonica, of all things. That was my first introduction to anything musical at all. My parents bought a piano for the house, and I enjoyed sitting down and just listening to things and reproducing it on the piano. I had no formal training, which really didn't help me later on when in the 4th or 5th grade, I started taking private lessons, and the teacher would say, play that, and I'd say, would you play that first? You know, get them to play it, and I could play it. But anyway, that's my first introduction to it, and my first introduction, I guess, into wind instruments would have been in my 6th grade. The high school band director came around to the 5th and 6th grade classes and said, how many of you would like to come to a concert in the auditorium and see all the instruments displayed and introduced?
Now, what high school was that?
This was B.B. Comer. This was a county school in Sylacauga, Alabama, and it was 1 through 12. But anyway, they demonstrated all the instruments, and he says, well, how many of you would be interested in playing one of these? Of course, I was one of them. Well, which one would you like to play? I said, well, I think I like the one with the 3 buttons there. That doesn't seem as complicated as the guys having to do this. I mean, this is serious business. But anyway, that's how I was introduced, not to trumpet, but to cornet. And I played that, then went into the band there. And then when I was in the 9th grade, my parents moved me to the city school system in Sylacauga, which at the time had one of the better known bands in the state. I mean, it was really a good program, and I really enjoyed it. So that's where I got started on all this. And from there, I started thinking seriously in my junior year about saying, you know, I really enjoy this. I like this better than any other class. I enjoy being in the band room. And by the time I was a senior, I decided that's what I want to do. So that's what I did.
Cool. So you were brought up in Sylacauga,
Alabama.
Alabama. Cool. Where did you begin your teaching career, and where did you go from there?
Well, when I was a senior at the University of Alabama in instrumental music, and my wife was a freshman, we got married. She dropped out of school, supported me through my senior year, and at the end of that year, there were not a whole lot of jobs available. And I said, you know, we talked about it, I said, we're here, I'm going to graduate school and see if I can get a part-time job. So I looked around, and through the help of some people, I got a part-time job, a half-day job in a small community, Gordo, Alabama, 1,800 people, part-time. So I went there in the mornings, and I went back to graduate school. I started in the summer in graduate school, and I went back in the afternoons to grad school, and I finished my master's degree the following summer. Well, I had been given in Gordo one band class a day, and the other I taught elementary music. So I started introducing all the 4th and 5th graders to band instruments. And by the end of the year, I had 50, 60 beginners. And this is a small school.
Wow.
And I said, I told my wife, I said, you know, I think I'll stay another year, and you can go back and finish your degree. Well, the second year, we had about 100 kids in the program. She was going back to get her degree. Third year, she got her BS degree in 3 years. Took me 4. And then they gave her a job at the elementary school there in Gordo, Alabama, and by that time, the program had gotten big enough that I was working full-time. And it's one of those situations that you don't run into very often. I mean, it was a place where in the 2 preceding years, they had 3 band directors. There were 13 kids in the band program.
Mm.
And I mean, it was just, I couldn't fail. I couldn't do anything that would hurt the situation, which was really good as a first-year teacher. And what I would do, I had so many mentors in that area. We had some really good bands and directors who really shared. I mean, I hardly ever had a rehearsal, a night rehearsal, that I didn't have one of those guys in there, not as much to critique the band as to critique me and say, hey, here's what you need to be doing, not this. And I mean, that really was one of those things that I guess you might not run into that situation very often, but the principal was all about having a band. And so she allowed me to pull beginners and intermediates and advanced kids out of just about any class as long as they didn't have a test. So I taught privately about 5 periods a day and had 1 full band class. And then I taught privately after school, and I taught privately at night, just anything to get the kids involved in it. And by the 3rd year, we had 157
Wow.
out of 370-something kids in the school. And we also that year went to district and state festival and got straight 1s, which had never happened in that school. So, and to make a long story short, it was just a really good place to be. All those mentors and community that bought into the program, the administration liked it. If I had a question, all I had to do was call one of my teachers at the university or one of my high school friends and say, hey, look, here's I need some help with this. What do I need to do? And that's one thing I'd say to anybody. Don't ever be bashful about asking questions. But we were really happy in that small community. And matter of fact, in '67, we built a new house. We were there. And I get this call from a friend of mine in Fort Walton Beach and says, would you come down and interview for a job at this new high school they're opening? And I said, well, I don't know. I talked to my wife about it, and she says, we don't want to move. I said, no, but we haven't had a vacation in 8 years. Let's go down there and see. So that's how we came down to Fort Walton Beach and interviewed with the superintendent and the principal. And you know, teaching in a small community the way I was, most of our instruments were donated by the bank or the tractor company or the feed company. You know, we just didn't have resources, although we did manage to build a pretty good inventory there. And when I got here and started looking at the situation, I said to the principal, the superintendent at the time, Max Bruner, I said, he said, well, what do you need to start this band program? I said, well, what are you going to give me to start it with? He says, hell, son, you name what you want. Well, that's what we want a band at this school. And I'm sitting there, you know, my jaw drops, and I said, okay. And I talked to the principal, C.F. Reynolds, who had gone to the University of Alabama the same 4 years I did. We didn't know each other, thank goodness. He's a real straight-ahead guy. But I said, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make you a list of everything I would need to start a completely new band program. And when you put that out on bid, I'll come back and sign a contract. Well, by the time I finished my list and gave it to him, my wife was in a state of shock. Oh, no, we don't know. And I said, look, we'll never hear from him again. Because what I put down was tubas, sousaphones, 2 sets of percussion, 4 bassoons, oboes, bass clarinets, anything I ever wanted, I put it down on that list.
Mm-hmm.
So we went back to Gordo. And about 3.5 weeks later, I get a call from the principal and says, well, Ernest, it's going out on bid. When are you going to come back and sign the contract? I said, oh, no. I said I was going to do this. And it was probably one of the more difficult decisions we ever had to make. But it was also a very good decision because over the next 30 years, we really, and I like finding a place that's good for your kids, for administration, parents, and just stay there. I mean, why
Sure.
move around
That's right.
to a greener place over here?
Now, was Fort Walton the first high school here?
No, Choctawhatchee High School.
Choctaw was.
Jim Leonard was the original director at Choctawhatchee High School,
Oh.
and it had gotten so large
Mm-hmm.
that they were going to have to split it out and build a new school.
Mm-hmm.
So we started with grades 7 through 10 at Fort Walton and added grades. Pardon me. And at the end of the third year, we had a little over 300 kids in the instrumental program,
My goodness.
7 through 12.
Mm.
And they moved the 7th through the 9th to Max Bruner Junior High.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another fortunate thing for me. I've always had people like Jim Dodd, who was there for 30 years and as a feeder program, and Nancy Thiele, who was one of the best woodwind teachers ever, was there. And I mean, I was very fortunate. And it all worked out.
That's great. What major challenges did you encounter as a band director? I mean, what were things that sort of gave you a bump in the road that you had to deal with?
I don't ever remember but one time getting to the point that I thought, I think I may just quit this. And that was in 1980 or 81. That was when all the dope stuff started getting in the schools and this and the other. And I had carried 2 bands to Tallahassee to the state festival. And on the way back, I had to toss 17 kids out of that band program for pot.
Mm.
Which that was unheard of. And I said, no. The next year, I got another ton of good kids with a different attitude. I said, that was a bump. But other than that, I really never experienced an obstacle that I couldn't find a way under, over, or around.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why you were so successful.
Well, like I said, I had this thing on my wall the whole time I taught at Fort Walton, quote by Calvin Coolidge, that shows the duck with the frog in its mouth, and the frog's got the throat, and he says, persistence pays. Never give up. The world is full of failed geniuses. So I figured, there's another observation that I have. Now, this could not be true, but 99% of the time, there are not any really bad situations, so bad that somebody couldn't fix it. It's having the persistence or the desire and the focus to fix it.
Right.
There's not that many bad situations where you can't have a band, because kids get up and they put their pants on one leg at a time, and my feeling, even when I started in Gordo, was this: if a student really wants to be in the band program, if he has as many as 3 fingers on one hand, I'm going to find something that he can do or wants to do. And a lot of kids stay in school because of band programs,
That's right.
athletic programs.
That's right. During your teaching career, were there any pivotal moments that brought you to your musical success?
I can think of 2. The first one may not pertain to anything. The first one was when I married my wife of 53 years, who is an oboe player. She was the drum major in the high school band that we both attended, and she bought into everything I did.
That's pivotal.
That's pivotal. Number 2, was getting that job, that first job in those circumstances, and having that many people willing to help you.
Yeah.
Because I told several people when I was in graduate school and I'd have a problem at school that day, and the kids would ask me something and I might not know it. I said, let me think about that tonight. And I'd go back to my classes that afternoon with Yale Ellis, who, by the way, at one time taught Bobby Bowden trombone.
Is that right?
Yes, I've pictured that. But he was an old high school band director who was at the college level. Colonel Butler was an old high school band director who was at the college level. And a lot of my teachers were like that. And they'd say, well, I mean, they had that practical knowledge. I said, here's what you do. And I'd go back the next day and say, okay, I figured this out. Here it is. And like I say, the kids thought, man, give him one night and he can figure out anything.
Who were your musical models or your mentors as you were progressing through your career? Who stands out as people you looked up to?
My college professors, Colonel Butler, Yale Ellis, they were models to me as to how to run a program, how to overcome obstacles, this, that, and the other. Bentley, I had so many that were really important to me that I looked up to. It's hard to start without leaving someone out, but I would. If you're asking, let me put it this way. If you're asking for what I thought a band ought to sound like, and that's what I think is important too, any director, you've got to have your own concept of what that sound is you want. And there's no model for that. You can't go in and somebody will give you a class and say, here's the way you do it, because it'll only work if it works for you. So you have to find things that work for you to get the sound and everything developed the way you want it. I always wanted my band to sound like the Marine Band. It didn't quite make it, but that was my epitome of what of what a band ought to sound like. Mm-hmm. The pitch, you've heard that. Yeah. There were so many groups like that. I was influenced by another one that influenced me greatly was John Long, Dr. Johnny Long. And the first time I ever met the man, he came to our high school band in Sylacauga, Alabama. He was friends with my high school director and directed the band several times. And I thought, that's where I met him. And he never forgot that. And he was another one that helped me in many ways. Mm-hmm. Jim Croft was a super model of what you want to do with a band. Mm-hmm. Just watching him when he do the honor bands. Or Frank Wicks was another one that there's so many people like that. It's hard to just pick out some and not think later, why didn't I remember that? But I had so many. My high school, where I did my internship at Tuscaloosa High School was just a really fine program, and Tommy Hamner was there for years, and he just took me under his wing and taught me a lot. Matter of fact, he was mostly responsible for my getting that part-time job in Gordo, Alabama. Mm-hmm. Because he told the principal, says, well, he's young, give him a shot at it, he can't make it any worse than it is.
Right.
So it's hard to just pick out. So, like I said, there's so many. Mm-hmm. I've always wanted to be as organized as you. I was never very organized.
That's a facade.
No, it's not.
One of the things we hope that these recordings will do is provide young band directors a chance to look at the videos and hear the comments of some of the people that have been so successful So what advice would you have for the young band directors, future band directors, based on your experience?
All right, and I thought about this considerably. And I truly believe that when you start teaching, well, number one, you got to have a passion for it. You got to really love it. Number two, you got to build it from the basics, from day one. I mean, you never get distracted from teaching basic fundamentals every day, because they'll go away if you don't. Build it on great music, and there's great music at every level. I mean, some's not technically as difficult, but I've had people say to me, could you give me a good, easy grade 4? And my response is, there is no good, easy grade 4. There is no good, easy music at all. I always felt like keeping the kids challenged all the time. I mean, don't ever let them get to a point and not push them a little beyond that part, because kids can do anything if they're motivated and really want to do it.
Yeah.
Another thing I would say, and I think particularly lately, pardon me, I think we're getting to the point, there's way too much time and focus on marching and marching competitions. I think that does a lot of things. It burns out band directors, it burns out kids. When you rehearse 5 days a week and take 3 or 4 weekends or more to take those kids out of things, you're losing students. I made my mind up early on that during the summer, before school started, I'd have 1 week of band camp. I would never have more than 2 marching rehearsals a week, and I never did. I mean, I said, these kids have got other things to do, and I would have lost some really good players to that. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with marching band. I loved it, and it's to entertain, for one. It's to teach good music. It's to get kids involved, all that, but don't let it become the focus of the program. If your band can't sit down and play really well, they certainly can't walk around and run around and play. I'm convinced that any successful program is going to be because of a successful concert band. And you just got to build that. It's got to, and you can, it can be done. Go to a place that you can find out if you can teach, and if you really enjoy teaching, and stay a while. Don't look around and keep saying, well, that's a little better, and that's a little better, I'll move here and Now, that's personal philosophy. That's what my advice would be, because you can find a place. There are numerous examples in this state of people who've been in a program for a long time who are extremely successful and could have gone many other places, but why do it?
Right.
It's that, and one point I made before, don't be hesitant to get successful people to come to your rehearsals and critique you and the band. Don't be afraid to do that. I mean, I didn't know anything when I got out of college. Now, I had private lessons, all these instruments, everything. I knew fingerings, I knew all this stuff, but I didn't really know anything about teaching. And that's what helped me so much, was having those people. I'd say, would you come Tuesday night and spend a couple of hours with them? Well, sure. I was never, I could always get, and at Fort Walton Beach High School, I never, 1 year in the 30 years there, that I didn't have several people come in and critique what I was doing and what the band was doing. Because, you'd be amazed. You think, boy, the band's playing really well right here. And they'd come in and say, what's that guy in percussion back there doing? I say, I hadn't been paying attention to it. So get people in to critique you and your program, and have a thick skin, in other words. I've often said my wife is the toughest critic I had because she just unload, and she actually, as much judging and playing and everything else as we've done, I think she could probably judge a band as well as I can.
I understand.
So she didn't hesitate to say I wasn't very good, was it?
Yeah. Is there one thing about your personal character that you would say enabled you to achieve such a high standard of excellence?
I'd have to say persistence. That and focus. I mean, the whole time that I was teaching, I got to school before anybody else got there. I sat down and made my notes for the day, and I checked them off as I did it, and I refused to deviate. I refused to get caught up in something unless it was a fire drill and not do what I had set down to do that day. And just being persistent. I mean, it's nothing so bad that you can't make it better.
That's right. That's right. Persistence is the key. Do you have a short story you want to share with us? Something that you remember or have a favorite moment? Or?
I guess one of my favorite moments in the whole time I was here was in the, I think it was probably the earlier, maybe the late 70s, somewhere between 75 and 80. And my symphonic band rehearsed every Tuesday night. I mean, they knew that. And parents came and watched, and which was fine. You know, I loved having them there. And one night, I looked up, and there was a guy sitting back there that I didn't recognize, or vaguely recognize. And I said, well, it's somebody's grandfather who came to pick him up after rehearsal. So when we took a little break, I walked back, and I said, hi, I'm Ernest Hebson. And he says, I'm Oliver Hobbs.
Oh, really?
And I thought, oh my God, I got to do the rest of this rehearsal. Because I had heard of Oliver Hobbs when I was in Alabama. I mean, I'd heard of him so many times. I had a tough time the rest of that rehearsal trying to make sure I didn't mess up. And you know, until the year he died, I don't think he ever missed coming to one of my rehearsals unannounced once or twice a year. He'd just walk in and sit down. And I also remember another story with Oliver when we were getting ready for a festival, and we were in the auditorium, and we were rehearsing. What were we rehearsing? I'll tell you in a minute. But at that time, Oliver was pretty old, and he didn't conduct anymore. And we were doing Fingal's Cave, and he was sitting back there. And I said, well, would you come up and talk to him about it? So he came up on the stage, and I said, would you take that little section right there? And he says, well, I want to tell you ahead of time, in measure so-and-so right there, there's a chord that's written wrong, and here's what you need to do to fix that chord. And 2 or 3 things just from right here. And I said, would you take him through that? And lo and behold, he got up on the podium, and man, he just went like crazy for a while. He was sweating and doing this, and the kids were saying, I hope he's going to be all right. But that was very memorable to me, that he did that. And he, like I say, those are things you remember forever.
That's right. So you were at Fort Walton a total of 30 years?
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, you certainly had a wonderful career, and everybody respects you and looks up to you. So you're the model for a lot of people.
Well, you can't have a good career without support.
That's true. That's
Lots of support. And fortunately, like say, if you can get the parents and the kids and administrators to buy into what you're doing, you're going to be successful.
That's right.
And if you don't have any one of those 3 components, you either work on it or it's not going to be successful.
That's right. Well, we thank you very much for your time, and we enjoyed your comments. Thank you, Ernest.
Okay, thank you.